Welcome to the WholeHog Podcast.
But my main concern is I just want to do the best damn job I can for the University of Arkansas.
I got a question for you though, Scotty. Do you know that there's other players on our team besides Desi?
Whoever we had on the plane is all we need. Turn that damn shit on.
Now, here's your host, Seth Campbell.
Welcome into the WholeHog Podcast. We took a week off, just like the football team did with the bye week, but we are back and we're going to get you prepared for Arkansas versus Texas A&M. Seth Campbell joined by Scotty Borderline. Matt Jones is going to join us over the phone later, but this is going to be the first time since 2012 that the Razorbacks have traveled to College Station, a venue that, well, Scotty, is pretty intimidating when it's pretty full. But even it's intimidating right now when it's not at full capacity because somehow, some way, A&M is fitting a lot of people in that stadium.
Yeah, it's still a little bit intimidating for some teams, even in the current climate. I think you can look at the picture that Matt used with the Texas A&M is going to have a rare home field advantage in the COVID era. Like you can see that the place is going to be pretty full and those people are going to be pretty juiced up for a night kick on Halloween. Like it's the perfect weekend to drink, right, and then go to a football game and get rowdy. I think they want to just those fans are probably going to show up and get pretty amped up for that game, just because they've A&M's had tons of success against Arkansas, over the last decade, and they want to keep it going.
Yes, all of their games have been super close, but it's been A&M with coming out on the winning side of all of them. So it'll be interesting to see how Arkansas can respond and if they can respond, because there's hope now. There's a lot of hope from Razorback fans after the start. The first 4 games under Sam Pittman going 2-2, 3-1, whatever you want to say. There's hope for Razorback fans, which is a good thing because people are now looking forward to watching the games on Saturday. But
people were upset that Arkansas didn't play last weekend,
which is a first in multiple years.
Yeah.
But also it's just one of those things of you can't let your hype and your expectations get too far ahead of you here. A&M is a really good team. They're ranked in the top 10 for a reason. Yes, I know that they got throttled by Alabama, but they've bounced back. They were able to beat Florida. They're a good team.
Yeah, the last time they played in College Station, they beat Florida, top 5 team, one of the best offenses in the country, with Kyle Trask and Kyle Pitts. That defense, I think, A&M defense is pretty serious too. They got some guys that are pretty scary. Like Buddy Johnson's a guy that jumps out. Like when I watched the A&M Mississippi State game, he's terrifying at the second level. And then Sam Pittman's talked all week about how aggressive their safeties are, and so I think that's going to be kind of a matchup to keep an eye on. How does Arkansas, if Felipe Franks wants to get the downfield passing game going, which he has on the road in the two road games that we've seen this year, I think Arkansas's receivers are going to have, that's a huge key. Like just getting separation and being able to, maybe if they're playing zone, find windows. And if you're playing man, if A&M's playing man, Arkansas's got to find a way to break free and let Felipe Franks get the ball out of his hands.
I think you wrote a very interesting story about Felipe Franks and his ability to play on the road, Scotty. I'm excited to see if he can utilize his weapons. We saw him utilize Devion Warren last time that Arkansas was on the road against Auburn without Traylon Burks. I want to see how those two mesh together and if Felipe can continue his road dominance.
Yeah, it's been pretty crazy, and I'll let you know how this story even started, like how it even came to my mind. So we were talking to Felipe on Tuesday, and somebody asked him, it's like it's a total football question. It's just like, hey, as a competitor, you want to go on the road, you want to play in front of as many people as you can. And he's like, well, yeah, I like playing at home. He has always loved playing at home. Like he's playing in Florida, he's playing one of the best home atmospheres in the country, and he likes playing at home in Arkansas. But his numbers throughout his career on the road are just – they're awesome. Like it almost doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like you feel like you should, as a quarterback, feel more comfortable playing in an environment that you are comfortable playing in, but on the road, it's like that. uneasiness, I guess, that some players feel going into a road environment. Like I feel like he kind of embraces it. And throughout his career, like he's completing almost like 65% of his passes, 17 touchdowns against 4 picks on the road. And he's been awesome away from home. And on the road this year, he's completed 6 of 9 passes at 16 plus yards down the field for 199 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then also on the road, like he's hit those short passes. I think that kind of maybe help him get into a little bit of a rhythm, like passes at or behind the line of scrimmage or less than 5 yards downfield. This year he's hit 27 of 33 for 218 yards and 3 touchdowns. And so he's been pretty good on the road. And I asked him like why do you like playing on the road? And he's like, man, if I had to give you a reason, like I don't know. I guess he likes feeling like everybody in the stadium's against him, and whoever he traveled on the plane with, like Sam Pittman likes to say, that's who he's got, and he's ready to ride with those guys. It was a pretty neat story. I'm glad kind of glad that I chart his passes every week, and so I could throw in some of his road performances this year, kind of give you an idea of his passing efficiency.
Yeah, I think that it's really interesting coming from you and being able to chart his passes. That was a really good story and really good insight into Felipe Franks and how he handles not only the pressure, but just how Arkansas has played. Arkansas has played 2 road games this year, and I don't know that Arkansas fans are ever going to get over this, but should be 2-0 in those road games. And
part of the reason for that is he's completing 72% of his passes on the road, which I think that's a little bit of a credit to Kendall Briles too. Like just, hey, we're on the road. Like if we get the chance, we're going to throw that knockout punch. Like I think they did against Mississippi State with the touchdown passes to Hudson Henry and Davion Warren. But he's mixing in, a good bit of those short to intermediate passes and letting shifty guys like, Traylon Smith and Davion Warren, like just kind of make some plays after the catch too.
How do you want the Razorbacks and Kendall Briles to utilize Burks and Warren in the game at the same time?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'm going to be really curious to see how that works. I think we saw a little bit of it against Ole Miss, and I think they're going to use Traylon Burks any way they can, right?
Yeah.
Like in the run game. Some of his bigger plays against Ole Miss came in the run game, kind of the run pass option where Felipe kind of looks like a little bit of an awkward backward pass.
Oh my goodness, that's so strange.
Yeah, but man, it was effective, wasn't it? Like Traylon was, I think, Arkansas' second leading rusher in the game, and I know he had a career high in rushing in that game. But I think they're probably going to use both guys going sideline to sideline and vertically, but I wouldn't be surprised to see, some of the slant type stuff. Maybe get Traylon over the middle. Maybe try to make a guy like Buddy Johnson miss. Now that I'm saying that, it might not be the wisest thing to send your best player over the middle against a monster of a linebacker. But I think they're just going to try to utilize him, get him in space. And Traylon has, I track yards after catch and all that too with each receiver. And Traylon against Ole Miss had 114 yards after the catch.
Wow.
And that's not, you can to me, like the rushes that Traylon was credited for, like those are catches to me,
yeah,
right?
Because he's catching the ball.
Yeah, he's catching the ball. And all of those yards come after the catch too. So just get the ball in his hands in space, sideline to sideline, and then maybe take your deep shot or two. I think Mike Woods is going to be big in this game. He's been pretty reliable throughout the year. I don't know that he's got a drop. I think he's said that he's got a drop or two, and he may have had one. I don't really know how you chart it, but there was one play where he's kind of wide open. It looked like he was wide open, kind of in the left flat against Ole Miss, maybe 15 or 20 yards downfield. He caught the ball, and then the ball got jarred loose. I don't know if you consider that a drop or a PBU. Other than that, man, he's made some really good catches, some contested catches, been a pretty reliable target. A&M's obviously, like, they've got to try to game plan to take Traylon away, right? And so
yes.
that leaves a Mike Woods and Davion Warren. Just, I think that kind of leaves them open for possibly having big days.
And then if you can possibly use Warren and use Burks even as decoys to where they're taking 2-3 guys out of the game, then you do open up spots for Woods and maybe a guy that's just been silent over the first 4 games in Trey Knox.
Yeah, don't know what's going on with him, but this would be a good week for him to kind of get it back right. I know he didn't play in the Texas A&M game last year, I think because of that hip injury a couple of weeks before against Ole Miss, but going back to Mike Woods, like I think this game means a lot to him. Like he grew up pretty close to College Station, and he says everybody at his school, A&M fans, and then he goes to Arkansas, and his first touchdown catch, I think in 2018, was against A&M from Ty Story in a pretty big game in Arlington. So I'm thinking that just like the meaning of this game, I know this game means a lot to Rakeem Boyd, but it means a lot to Mike Woods too. And with A&M, obviously, like if they're wise, like they should try to take away Traylon Burks like that. I think that leaves Mike Woods, who's outside of Davion Warren been your most reliable target. I think he could have a nice game.
Going to the running game, Scotty, now. Traylon Smith, Rakeem Boyd. They've both shown flashes, and you know what Rakeem Boyd can do. You know what he can do from last year. You know that he is a premier back in the SEC. But Smith has shown you what he can do this year in his play at Auburn. How do you split up reps between those two guys?
I think you start with Rakeem, and he's going to be gassed up for this game too. Just he signed with A&M out of high school. It didn't work out there, but he's I mean this one's big for him. I think you just if you can get him off to a good start, then you ride with him, and then whenever he needs a breather, you throw Traylon Smith in there, and then maybe you throw Traylon Smith in there for a series just to like give Rakeem a break and see if you can catch Texas A&M kind of on their heels. But I think you just ride with the hot guy. Like if you can get the run game going and can find a hot hand at running back, like that's the question. Like can Arkansas get the run game going? A&M's pretty stingy run defense, so I think like there's just been such a big point of emphasis, I think, trying to get the run game going. I wouldn't be surprised if Arkansas does find some success there and Rakeem has an okay game. It's about time that he does. And I want to see him like run. How he's run against Texas A&M in the past? Mm-hmm. Like he's breaking through tackles, and he's turning like a 6-yard gain into like a 12-yard run. And he's getting up, and he's just, like, letting everybody know that he's not to be messed with. Like, you need to see that Rakeem Boyd. 'Cause I feel like we haven't seen – I know he hasn't been super healthy this year, throughout the year, clearly. But I just want to see him run a little bit more physically and a little bit tougher, because it almost seems to me like – I don't want to say that he's, like, lost any of his elusiveness or the ability to break away from tacklers. But I remember like early in the Ole Miss game, like he catches a pass in the flat, and it's just him and a receiver or him and a defensive back between the first down marker, and he can't make the guy miss. I want to see Rakeem Boyd make people miss. Like I feel like that's what's kind of been missing from the run game, and when he catches those swing passes out of the backfield.
I think that Rakeem Boyd, I think he hasn't, like you said, and we know that he hasn't been fully healthy. I think that has taken an effect on just his psyche, because he's a guy that has had injury troubles throughout his entire college career. And I think that that may just be weighing on Rakeem to where he doesn't want to get injured again. He has all of this hype and potential and wants to go play at the next level and can go play at the next level. We'll get a shot to play at the next level. But I think that starts to weigh on you if every time you go out there, in the first game against Georgia that you get hurt, or the second game against Mississippi State, you're coming up lame. So I feel like that can weigh on you a little bit, and it might need to be a game like Texas A&M where he has this extra motivation, where he has this extra focus. It might take something like that to get him out of this quote-unquote funk that he is in and help him to push further to where, he might not be, during an Ole Miss game, he might be scared to get into contact because he's scared that the Ole Miss guy might come in and injure him. Like I don't know this for a fact. We haven't gotten to talk to Rakeem in a while, but
Yeah, we knew we weren't going to get him this week.
yeah, no, just some of maybe inferring from watching. But when he's playing against A&M, that extra motivation to run through guys, and then if he can get through this game and stay healthy, then all of a sudden he's maybe can take that into the rest of the season because he's got the experience now of, hey, I can take these hits, I can run through people, I can make people miss and come through okay on the other side.
And right now, my right eye is hurting. My contact is like bothering me a lot. And so it's easy for me to say that Rakeem should come back out and play well through a shoulder injury.
He's over here crying.
A surgically repaired shoulder and a bad ankle. And I'm struggling right now just to talk because my eye's hurting. But I just, like, we talk about Traylon Burks. We understood that he probably was far from 100% against Ole Miss. I don't think Rakeem Boyd was anywhere close to 100% either. I just don't. Like, the way that he played, the way he ran the ball, and the drop, like, it's not conducive to me to a player being 100% because we know when Rakeem Boyd is healthy, he's capable of making guys miss. He's fairly sure-handed. Like, he's not going to drop that ball on third down, that on the screen pass when he had nothing but green grass in front of him. Like, he's healthy. He's not going to do that. So I think the week off with the bye week came at a perfect time for him, and I think he's going to be pretty amped up for A&M.
Speaking of health, Scotty, let's shift over to the defense. There's a few guys that Arkansas is hopefully going to get back in Bumper Pool and Dorian Gerald, and those are going to be key guys for Arkansas because A&M likes to run the ball, and Kellen Mond might need to go to the run a little more. As you mentioned this before the podcast even started, that he's running out of receivers to throw the ball to. But how big is it going to be for Arkansas if they can't get a guy like Bumper Pool or a guy like Dorian Gerald back for this game?
It's pretty big. As you got, like you said, like A&M's receiving core is like The Walking Dead. Like Kendrick Rogers and Jamon Osborne were two of your top targets last year. They're not with you anymore. The Sutherland kid? I think he had maybe the game-winning touchdown catch against Florida, or a big touchdown catch late in the game against Florida. Tore his ACL on the play. But Anais Smith is a guy at receiver who had a pretty good day against Arkansas last year. I think he had 5 catches for 80 yards and a touchdown. So he's still there. I think Kellen Mond's top target at the moment is like a tight end. And so I think Arkansas's linebackers, and they're, maybe a guy like Greg Brooks, whoever playing the nickel, might be able to match up with those guys. But the run game is going to be super important because I'm looking at SEC StatCat, which if you haven't looked at this site yet, I mean, you could spend all day on it just looking at all kinds of stats. It's solely dedicated to SEC football. I'm looking at Isaiah Spiller, and this year he's running the ball super well. Like left of center, 6 yards of carry, right of center, 5.3. He gets off tackle on the left side, 6.5 yards, right side of the field, off tackle, 12 yards per carry. You've got to be able to slow that guy down. You got to, and that's going to be really tough. Like if you don't have Bumper Pool there, that's where Hayden Henry has to come in and play really well. Like if Bumper Pool isn't able to go, Hayden Henry was awesome in that Ole Miss game, but Texas A&M is a little bit of a different beast. Like Isaiah Spiller is one of the better running backs in this league. Like, we talked in the preseason about is Rakeem Boyd in the top 3, and we were like, it's Kylan Hill, Najee Harris, probably Rakeem Boyd. After 4 or 5 weeks, like you could say Tank Bigsby's probably in that group.
Yeah.
Isaiah Spiller definitely deserves to be in that group too, and Najee Harris is clearly there. You've got to be able to set the edge, and that's where a guy like Dorian Gerald, he can do that. Julius Coates is going to be big in this game. Like he's got to show up. He's got to show up and like I said, be able to set the edge and drop A&M behind the line of scrimmage or for short short gains on the ground and make Kellen Mond throw it to some of the receivers that we've never heard of before.
Jalen Weidermeyer is the tight end that you were mentioning earlier for Texas A&M. That'll be a big key in person to watch out for. But you're right, Scotty. This missing Bumper Pool would be huge if he is not able to go. He's a guy that led the team in tackles last year. He is a run stopper up the middle, and he can plug a hole. I mean, he knows how to do that in the SEC. So
Bumper's he's tied for 11th in the league in tackles, and he missed a game.
Yeah,
and he's like tied for third with 4 pass breakups.
He hasn't played basically 2 games because they have the bye week and they have the game that he missed. So he's basically tied for 11th in the league and has missed 2 games. Now, some of the teams in the SEC have missed 1 game as well because of the bye week, but the bye week is stretched over last week, this week, and the next week. Does Barry Odom, with the threat from A&M of the running, we've seen them switch defensive fronts. Do they go with a 4-front against A&M?
Yeah, I would think so. I think you want to get plenty of bodies in the box and threaten Kellen Mond to throw the ball. And I know that sounds weird because he's a veteran, like he's been around, like Sam Pittman said, since the 20s. And he's got a world of experience. He's never lost to Arkansas. He got pretty good numbers against Arkansas, and running the ball too.
Yes.
Like he's a big threat to run, and so
he killed Arkansas with a long run up the middle in the 4th quarter. One of those games.
Yeah, he broke Scooter Harris down pretty good in that on that play. I remember that one vividly. I think that was
that Chad?
2018.
I think it was Chad's first year. I think you're right.
Yep, 2018. Yeah, because I remember I got to AT&T Stadium really early that day. I got to Arlington at like 2:30 in the morning. Then by that was an 11 a.m. kick. Yeah, by like 8 o'clock, I was in the stadium. That was a long day. Anyway, yeah, I remember that one pretty vividly. Yeah, I don't know if you necessarily load the box, like put 8 guys in there, but 7's probably pretty solid. I think this might be a week that you see Joe Fouché at safety, like come down into the box. He's a bigger bodied guy that's not afraid of contact whatsoever, I would say. And so I think getting some bigger bodied guys in the box to try to slow the run and also keep an eye on Kellen Mond, pulling the ball from Isaiah Spiller. I think that's going to be pretty big.
Good stuff there, Scotty. All right, well, we're going to take a short break here on the WholeHog Podcast, and when we come back, we're going to talk to Matt Jones. Matt Jones is going to join us over the phone. We're going to talk a little bit more about Arkansas and Texas A&M.
WholeHogSports.com has the largest, most experienced staff of reporters covering sports in Arkansas. Football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. You'll find it at WholeHogSports.com. The website includes up-to-minute news, daily commentaries, and award-winning photography from the staffs of Hogs Illustrated and the Democrat Gazette. For subscriptions, call 1-800-757-6277. That's 1-800-757-6277. Or visit us online today. WholeHogSports.com.
Welcome back into the WholeHog Podcast, and we are now joined by Matt Jones. Matt, thanks so much for joining us over the phone today. And let's just start with the Arkansas defense. They lost Jerry Jacobs, who's decided to opt out for the rest of the season and is already in South Florida preparing for the NFL draft. What do you expect to see now that Jacobs is gone from that Arkansas secondary?
Well, I mean, I'm sure we're going to see Hudson Clark starting on one side and Montaric Brown starting on the other. That's I think that might have had as much to do with his decision as anything else. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but it does seem interesting, the timing of him leaving, given that Brown is expected to be back in the lineup this week. And it's from a depth perspective, because if somebody goes down, obviously you would like to have someone with Jacobs, with his experience and his maturity in the back end. But from a starting standpoint, I think they're in really good shape with Brown and Clark. I mean, we didn't see a whole lot of Montaric this year. I don't remember him really getting burned a whole lot against Georgia. Maybe you guys can correct me if I'm wrong about that. And then, I think Hudson Clark has been playing just as well as could ever be expected, if not better. since he came in when Brown got hurt against Mississippi State. So I think those two have played the same position, but I think that they've also, they cross-trained at a lot of different positions during the offseason. And so it'll be interesting to see, who ends up at the field corner position, who ends up at the boundary corner position, and whoever is out of position relative to where they began the season, how do they adapt there? But I think they're fine from a starting point or, starting perspective. But depth is a big deal right now with COVID and then the potential of injuries. And so I do think it hurts them from that standpoint.
We were talking about it, Matt, right before we went to break. Scotty and I were about the fact of, with the threat of Isaiah Spiller and A&M's run game and the fact that Kellen Mond doesn't have a whole lot of receivers to throw to anymore, big name receivers anyway, does Barry Odom go at the forefront against A&M?
I think they're going to switch it up. I think they're going to do a lot of different things based on, what down and distance are they facing against A&M? Where are they on the field? What are some tendencies that they've seen on film? Sam Pittman during his radio show this week said that they're going to have times where they can get to Kellen Mond with 3 rushers, which tells me that they're going to do probably some of the same things that they did against Mississippi State and Ole Miss and drop 8 players back into coverage. But I also think you're going to see them stack the box more against A&M than they did in either of those games, because Mississippi State doesn't run the ball, and Ole Miss wouldn't take what Arkansas was giving it. They just kept throwing the ball all over the field. And part of that had to do with the score, but I think part of it had to do with just some stubbornness that they wanted to pass instead of run. And A&M's going to run. They're going to run the ball. I think that this is a more polished version of what we expected from Georgia in the first game of the season, in that they are a run-first team. They try to use the run game to set up the play-action pass. And so I think Arkansas is going to gear up to stop the run more in this game than I think they did either Mississippi State or Ole Miss. So I don't think it's going to be the exact same defensive philosophy, but I do think you'll see times where they are dropping 8 into coverage, especially in long down and distances.
Well, we've seen Barry Odom is not afraid at all to mix things up on the defensive side. No. He'll throw 3 at you, and then the next down he'll throw 7 at you coming at the quarterback. What is the key for Arkansas's defense in getting Kellen Mond uncomfortable?
Well, you got to get some pressure on him, and I'm not sure they're going to be able to do that with the type of offensive line that Texas A&M has. So they're very experienced across the front. They've got 2, maybe 3 all-SEC type offensive linemen, and they haven't given up a sack since the first game of the season. And you got to think that includes games against Alabama and Florida where they didn't give up a sack. The 2 sacks that they've given up this year were both in the Vanderbilt game. Even Mississippi State, who's had a pretty decent defensive front over the years, they didn't get to him either. And so, I think you got to get him outside the pocket. If you get him outside the pocket, then you've got to be able to tackle him if he takes off running. He's not looking to run as much this year as he has in the past. I think that there's a little bit of a misconception about Kellen Mond because of the way that he was used that first year under why am I forgetting the name? Kevin Sumlin. The way he was used in that offense, he was a dual threat quarterback, and against Arkansas his freshman year, he ran it for probably 130, 150 yards. He had a 78-yarder in that game. Should have been a 90-yard touchdown, and they had an official aired and called him out of bounds at the 12-yard line. But he looks more like a traditional quarterback to me this year. He's staying in the pocket. It helps that he's got a really good offensive line. But maybe things change up now that they don't have receivers. And you touched on that, Seth. And they're really thin right now at their receiver position. And, their 2 top targets at this point are their tight end, J.D. Wademeyer, and Anais Smith, who's kind of bounced around from running back to receiver and back, kind of like a T.J. Hammonds at Arkansas. They don't have that traditional receiver right now, at least who I think is capable of having, or maybe not capable of having, but who has demonstrated that they can have a big game catching the ball.
Is Isaiah Spiller the best back that Arkansas has seen so far this year?
Yes, because Kylan Hill did not play but just a couple of snaps in the Mississippi State game.
Okay.
I think Hill was the best running back they've seen to this point in the season. You think about the Auburn game; they didn't have Sean Shivers for that game. Jerry Neely's a good back. Ole Miss didn't really use him that much in the game a couple of weeks ago, and so I think Spiller's the best back they're going to see. I think he's a first-team All-SEC running back at this point. I think it's he and Najee Harris at Alabama. I think they're the two best backs in the league.
They did get to face Tank Bigsby, though. Is there any way that you can take some of that film or, if you're a Razorback fan, take some of that you saw Arkansas use against Tank Bigsby and see if they can't use that against Spiller as well?
Maybe, but I just think what A&M does is so much different offensively than what Auburn does. Auburn's going to try to beat you to the sidelines, and A&M tries to beat you between the tackles. Pittman really likes – you can always tell when Pittman likes what he sees on film because he'll talk up the other team. Some coaches won't do that, but you can tell he really likes what he sees from A&M's front five and the way that they run the football. I mean, that's the type of offense that he wants to have at Arkansas. He wants to have a mobile quarterback who can get outside the pocket and do some dual threat type things. But I think in his heart, he wants to be a run first up the A gap type football team, and I think that you're going to see from Texas A&M this week the type of football that Pittman wants to run at Arkansas, at some point in time.
All right, good stuff, Matt. We'll get you out of here with this question. I asked Scotty this earlier. How big is it if Dorian Gerald and Bumper Pool, two big stoppers for Arkansas's defense, if they can't play in College Station?
Oh, I think it's big if they can't play, and I think it's big if they can. Gerald he's got the potential to – he's Arkansas's best pass rusher, I think. And so if he can play, then that gives you that pass rush ability potentially against a team that hasn't given up a lot of sacks. And if you can get pressure on their quarterback, who's not really, experience isn't the right word, but maybe who's not used to having that kind of pressure this season, maybe you can get him to make some mistakes. So I think it's big if they can have him. I think Bumper Pool is a big deal. And it's not just if he can play, but it's, can he play at the level that he played in the Georgia game? Is he healthy enough to play at that level? You saw Grant Morgan against Ole Miss play with basically one arm and had the game of his life and maybe the best game we've seen this season. If they can have Morgan and Poole even at, say, 75-80%, I think that makes them a really formidable defense. And I think their linebackers are going to have to play really well in this game because I do think you're going to see a lot of three-down lineman sets like we talked about earlier. And so I think it's going to be up to the linebackers to, really crash down and make a lot of tackles against that A&M run game. And, if you've got Poole and Morgan healthy, then that makes the defense a lot better. And if you have one or both of them, not playing up to, close to their full strength, then, I think there's a drop off from them to their backups. So I think it's a big deal if those two guys are healthy. And not only that, but, Brown, he's back. How does he play? I think he's probably, close to about 100%. But he hadn't played in 3 games now. And then I thought it was interesting whenever Sam Pittman was on his when he was on his radio show this week, he mentioned that Deion Edwards has been injured and that he's back this week, and that Miles Slusher has been injured and that he's back. And they didn't say what the injuries were, but so I think that, the defense is getting maybe to the best health that it's had since that Georgia game. And that's really saying something with how well they played defensively in 2 of their last 3 games.
Yeah, hopefully that they can get healthy, and hopefully the COVID bug will stay away from the Arkansas football team, and we'll see all of those guys out on the field at College Station. The first time the Razorbacks will be at College Station since 2012. Well, Matt, thanks so much for joining us.
Okay, appreciate it, guys.
All right, Matt Jones from WholeHogSports.com joining us there.
Want more coverage of your home team? Download the Whole Hog Sports Video on Demand app. Check out the Fan Zone and get up-to-the-minute videos, podcasts, and features on football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. Search for WholeHog Sports on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire at home. And take it with you on the go by downloading it for your mobile device in your app store. The WholeHog Sports Video on Demand app. Get it today.
Welcome back into the Whole Hog Podcast. Seth Campbell, and now we have Travis Brown. Travis writes for the Bryan College Station Eagle, covers the Texas A&M Aggies. And, well, Travis, thanks so much for joining us. Let's just get right into it. There's been a lot of talk up here in Northwest Arkansas and really across the state of Arkansas for, Texas A&M has really one of the best home field advantages in a normal year, but especially this year because they're able to pack in a lot of fans. How big of an impact did you see the fans make in that Florida game?
Yeah, I think that they really did make a little bit of an impact. You saw one time there, I believe it was in the third quarter, that Florida even had to call a timeout because I believe a third down because the noise was getting up there and they couldn't get their signals in and had to regroup on the sideline. So I think it does make an impact. A&M has the largest capacity up until the Big Ten re-entered. A&M had the largest capacity of a stadium that was in play and led the nation in average in the 24,000 because they're at a 20% capacity, and 25% of the largest venue, of course, is going to have you be the largest crowd in the country as far as college sports goes. So, I think it does make a little bit of a difference. I think teams will still have to, teams that might have not had to deal with, their silent counts and their things like that might have to reinstitute those when they come to Kyle Field. So it helps for sure.
The Aggies, like the Hogs, are coming off of a bye week this week. What do you want to see, or Jimbo Fisher, I guess, really want to see his Aggies improve on coming off of the bye week?
I think that a little more consistency in the defensive secondary has always been something that has been a little bit of a sticking point with this team. They have given up a decent amount of explosive plays this year, and most of those have come from the pass side of things. So definitely want to shore that up. And then especially as it pertains to this matchup coming up with Arkansas, ball security is going to be something that A&M really going to want to focus on, of course, with how well Arkansas has been able to force turnovers this year. A&M has been a little bit turnover prone. Both of Kellen Mond's interceptions have been returned for pick sixes. I think if you, for the story I did today in the paper, if you count turnovers on downs this year, turnovers have accounted for 38 opponents' points for A&M this year. And they something definitely they need to shore up for this matchup coming up Saturday with how good Arkansas is at forcing those turnovers.
With the injuries, that's a really good stat, by the way, as we're talking to Travis Brown from the Bryan College Station Eagle. With injuries and opt-outs at the wide receiver position, Kellen Mond looks out there now, and it's a little bit thinner than when he first started. Who are some of the threats that maybe Razorback fans should be aware of for Kellen Mond?
Well, really the biggest player I think to look out for in this team is Hezekiah Jones at wide receiver. He is a veteran guy who was injured prior to the Vanderbilt game and hasn't seen any action this year. But, I mean, he was going to be the standout go-to guy for Kellen Mond this season prior to that injury with, like you mentioned, some of the other injuries and some of the other opt-outs this season. So Jimbo Fisher was a little wishy-washy. He said he was back practicing after having a leg injury earlier in the season, like I said. He's back practicing this week. He said it'll depend on how he practices this week, if he'll play. Kellen Mond came out and said we should be able to see him this week out on the field, and he seemed pretty excited about it. And why wouldn't you be when you have a guy that you throw the ball to for the past 4 years back out there that you know knows the playbook and can run some good routes and has that speed ability to spread out the offense. So if he can play and is back to 100%, that's going to be a big boost for the Aggie offense. But Anaya Smith has been A&M's main target at wide receiver, not Smith, as far as wide receivers go. And he's kind of their main mismatch guy. You'll see him line up in the backfield a little bit, take some handoffs. You'll see him in the slot. You might see him even further outside. And then Jalen Weidermeyer is Kellen Mond's security blanket at tight end, who actually leads the team in catches in distance targets. So and yards after catch. So it'll be those are kind of how it's going so far. In Mississippi State game, really it was only Anaya Smith and Chase Lane and Jalen Weidermeyer that got any targets whatsoever. So the other guys really haven't made much of an impact yet. Those will be the guys to look out for.
From the outside looking in, with the coaching change and for how long Kellen Mond has been there, it really looks like from where he started, Mond was more of a dual threat guy to where he is now. Is he's not near as willing to take off with his legs. What have you seen out of the development of Kellen Mond since Jimbo Fisher has taken over at A&M?
Yeah, it's been interesting. I think when Mond was working under Kevin Sumlin, that dual threat nature, that ability for him to run the ball and make plays with his legs was vastly more utilized than under Jimbo Fisher. I think Jimbo really emphasizes and likes his quarterbacks to be guys who stand in his pocket, to work through progressions, to make the reads, and it's been seemingly a point of Kellen's to make sure that he has developed into that more prototypical passer that also has the ability to extend plays if need be. A&M's offensive line this year has been so vastly improved that from the last 2 years that Kellen hasn't necessarily been running for his life. He's had a clean pocket for the majority of the time, but I believe A&M actually is one of the lowest in the conference in scramble play. Because of it. So a lot of that necessarily has to go back on the offensive line, giving Kellen the clean pocket so he can work through his progressions and not have to run around for his life. But it has been something we've asked about a lot. And that, you go back to the 2017 game where Kellen Mond kind of steps on the stage and he off that what appeared to be an 89-yard touchdown run that got called back, that he should have stepped out, but he stepped out of bounds and really didn't. And has really done some good things on the ground against Arkansas on the past few years, but you don't really see that as much for Kellen Mond, and I think that fits into a little bit more of Jimbo Fisher's philosophy on quarterbacks and the fact that this year the offensive line has just really given them a lot more support.
You mentioned the offensive line. They've allowed very few sacks this year. How has the progression of the offensive line changed the A&M offense?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting thing to watch because as A&M was exiting the season last year after the bowl game, the biggest question mark that any of the sports writers who cover the team had was, how is this offensive line going to progress? Because you look at the recruiting classes, you look at their depth chart, there really wasn't anybody that was going to come in to change, to mix things up this year. It was going to be the same core group of guys. And so everyone was saying this is going to be a pivotal spring practice for this offensive line. Well, as we moved through the pandemic and spring practice got canceled, that became even more of a talking point because it's how is an offensive line going to continue to get those reps, continue to develop, and get better with no spring practice, with a truncated summer workout session, with a weird fall camp, but they've done it somehow, and actually become one of the better offensive lines in the conference, allowing just one sack of Kellen Mond, and A&M ranks very, very high in the conference in fewest tackles for losses. Well, tackles for loss. So, they say it when we've asked them. They say it has a lot to do with continuity, just getting used to each other. Having Ryan McCollum in at center, he's a guy that was the offensive VP after the 2019 spring practice session, but a bulging disc in his back and had to basically miss the majority of last season. Tried to go out there. When we talked to him, he said that most of the time he tried to go out there and play, he couldn't walk the next day because of it. He's gotten that healed up. I think he would have been center last year, but Colton Prager had to fill in because of that injury. And I think having him back to guide and call out the coverages, be that quarterback on the offensive line, that sure seems to have helped as well.
Talking to Travis Brown here on the WholeHog Podcast. Travis, writer for the Bryan College Station Eagle. Travis, we've spent 10 minutes here talking about the offense, so I guess we should talk a little bit about the other guys on the other side of the ball. What does A&M defense bring?
The run defense has been the key for A&M this year. They rank very high in the nation in run defense, top 5 run defense in the nation because of the strength of that defensive front that they have with Bobby Brown and Jaden Peavy. Michael Clemens is our defensive end, is a guy that people have talked about and said he's going to be the next big thing for 4 years, and he's finally kind of seeing the fruits of that after going through some injuries and having a successful season this year. And DeMarvin Leal has provided an edge rush on the other side. Edge rush is just a place thing that they haven't really been great at the past couple of years, and it's really kind of shown through this year as those guys have developed. Again, as with any team that they play this year, if you're going to beat A&M defensively, it's taking shots downfield against a defensive secondary that a little bit inexperienced and has had to be kind of had a little bit of trial by fire, but B, in a defensive scheme with Mike Elko, that he's very aggressive with the safeties, likes to bring them down in the box to support the run, likes to blitz with the safety sometimes, so it leads the cornerback and the other safeties on the island sometimes, and that leaves it man-to-man, one-on-one, and if the offensive guy can come out and prevail in that, then usually it results into an explosive play. So passes downfield is kind of been A&M's weakness.
All right, Travis. Well, thanks so much for joining us. I'll let you go on this question. The news kind of from this week has been the fact that Arkansas has decided to play next year's Arkansas A&M game back in Jerry's World in Dallas at AT&T Stadium. From everything that you've read down there in College Station, how does the Dallas game go over with A&M and then A&M fans too?
Yeah, most of the A&M fans here, and really just all the A&M fans, aren't a big fan of it. I mean, with all the pomp and circumstance and everything that goes into football game, not to mention Kyle Field being one of the biggest, loudest venues in the country, A&M fans will really relish that home field advantage and enjoy having those games down here. I think that I don't think that anybody necessarily really sees the value of going up there, even with the recruiting purposes, because, I mean, Dallas is close enough, and A&M and notoriety in the state that it's not like you need that exposure in Dallas for kids and football players in Dallas to know what and where Texas A&M is. So I don't necessarily think they see that value beyond having another game here in Kyle Field. Most of them are going to be excited when that contract winds up here. I think everyone saw the value of it when A&M was still in the Big 12 and it was a non-conference matchup, but having a conference game be at a neutral site, losing the revenue that comes from that home game every other year, and having the ability to Kyle Field, I think A&M fans would rather see that than have a trip up to AT&T. Now, on the other hand, I know players have, said, toed the party line a little bit in saying that, they love having the 12th man in Kyle Field, but there always are a few of them, and some of them that kind of leave the qualifier out there too, that it's fun getting to play in a pro stadium. It's fun getting to pretend to be a pro for a day and put on your best suit and walk through the tunnels of Jerry World and get to kind of pretend to have that NFL experience. I personally think that's one of the reasons why that game has been so close in years past, even when the two teams don't necessarily look like they're quite as equal on paper. It's just that adrenaline rush that you can get from that kind of experience of getting to pretend like you're a professional for a day. So I'll be interested to see in this game this week if both teams still play up and still seem to get that kind of adrenaline rush and the game stays really close like it has in years past in Kyle Field. And if that's the case, I point my finger to, this really is a rivalry game, and both teams really like beating up on that logo that's on the other side of the line from them. Or is a lot of it just that adrenaline rush from getting to have that pro experience each year? And I think the players kind of enjoyed it.
Well, good stuff there, Travis. Really appreciate you joining us here on the WholeHog Podcast.
You got it. Thanks.
Travis Brown, once again, from the Bryan College Station Eagle. Make sure to check him out there on their website.
WholeHogSports.com has the largest, most experienced staff of reporters covering sports in Arkansas. Football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. You'll find it at WholeHogSports.com. The website includes up-to-minute news, daily commentaries, and award-winning photography from the staffs of Hogs Illustrated and the Democrat Gazette. For subscriptions, call 1-800-757-6277. That's 1-800-757-6277. Or visit us online today, WholeHogSports.com.
Welcome back into the Whole Hog Podcast. All right, Scotty, we're going to wrap things up here on the Whole Hog Podcast. Just putting a bow on Arkansas versus Texas A&M talk. We've talked about the offense, what they need to do. Talked about the defense, a little bit of what they need to do. But just overall, in general, Arkansas is going into College Station. What do you want to see them do, or what do you think they need to do in order to get this victory?
Yeah, it's kind of like we talked about Felipe Franks earlier. I think he's got to have a really precise, efficient game, throwing the ball. You got to be able to hit those short throws. Because those short throws, can kind of get you to fall into a little bit of a rhythm, with your intermediate and deep balls. So I think that's going to be big. He's got to take care of it. Like he's been great on the road. Like I said earlier, 72% completion percentage on the road, no turnovers against 6 touchdowns. Just awesome. So you got to have Felipe go in there and play like a veteran, experienced SEC quarterback. Your run game, you got to get something from it. Like whether it's Rakeem Boyd or Traylon Smith, maybe both. Maybe you can get something in the running game from Traylon Burks again. Like that would be a way to, maybe alleviate some of the pressure from Rakeem, making him not feel like he has to go out and absolutely run for 100 yards in order to win. Mike Woods, I think, like I said, is going to be big. He's been pretty sure-handed, so I'm expecting kind of a big day from him. And then on the defensive side of the ball, it's just the question mark of like, is Bumper Pool going to be there? And if not, is Hayden Henry up to the task? And I think he is. Like I asked Sam Pittman about him during the bye week, and he said he's like this crazy-eyed kind of linebacker, throwback type player who plays with kind of a reckless abandon that I think he really likes. Like he's an old school type player. Like he wears ankle socks. Like you don't see guys do that. And I don't think he wears gloves either. It's just kind of like Sam said, he's just a throwback guy. So I think Hayden Henry could end up being like a big key in this game. I think he's a physical enough guy and smart enough guy, and he's a senior. He's a senior. Like he's been around for a long time. He knows what he's doing, and so he'll be big. And can Arkansas's front, whatever, if it's a 3-down, 4-down, can you get pressure on Kellen Mond and kind of make A&M one-dimensional? It's like we talked about. A&M's only got like a couple of receivers who we know their names.
Right.
Like you gotta. I feel like if you can limit those guys, you kind of tie A&M one of their arms behind their back, and it's just, can Isaiah Spiller and Kellen Mond beat you on the ground? So those are just a couple of things. I know I rambled. I tend to do that, but there's a lot that Arkansas needs to do to be able to win a game on the road against a top 10 team. Like it's not just do this. It's like it's a bunch of things. Top 10 team on the road at night, and you got to be able to handle the crowd. Like it's easily going to be the biggest they face this year.
I think that this is one of those things. I'm also going to ask you for a bold prediction, Scotty. So I'm going to give you some time to think about that, put you on the spot. But I'm going to give you mine first. This is one of those games. I hate to be wait and see guy. Well, they got to beat this guy, wait and see, because this is a team that was wait and see if they would beat the bottom dwellers of the SEC when the season started. They've shown that they can beat SEC teams. They beat Mississippi State and Mississippi. This is another level of competition. This is a step up in competition. And I think that the jury is still out a little bit on this Arkansas football team of they are the most improved team in the SEC by far, but how improved?
Yeah, because I think you look at the teams they played the first 4 weeks. Georgia is legit. Like,
right.
We know that, but they're not there yet. Like,
they're still working on some things.
Yeah, like they're playing a 5'10" former walk-on at quarterback. Like, they're a great team. Elite defense, I think. Alabama kind of, maybe knocked them down a peg, but that's Alabama. And then Mississippi State, not who we thought they were going to be after week 1.
Man, they're falling apart.
Auburn should be 1-4, and Ole Miss is a missed extra point away from not having a win this year. So, given that's who Arkansas's played, and so to some people it might not be a surprise that Arkansas's held their own and won a couple of games against those teams. But now the schedule's about to get really tough.
If you come out and even, I hate to say play well, because Arkansas has played well against A&M for the past, 8 years, ever since they moved the game back to Arlington, which technically would be about 6 years. But Arkansas's played well against A&M the past 6 years, and then that hasn't translated to other games. But I'm going to go out, since this game is at College Station, I'm going to go out on a limb, and this is not my bold prediction, by the way. But if they play well against this game, then you feel like they have a shot in every single game left on their schedule except for Alabama.
Yeah, you're probably right.
I don't.
Maybe Florida.
If you divide the SEC into tiers, you look at it and you're like, oh, well, Alabama, Florida, A&M would kind of be in that top tier. Alabama's like a tier above those people.
Right.
Like, we saw what Alabama did to Georgia. We've seen what Alabama did to A&M.
They're in a class of their own.
They are. So while you can compete with a top 10 team, and that would be really good, I just don't think that that's the same as competing with Alabama this year.
No, it's not. But coming off of 2-10 seasons, 2 winless seasons in the SEC, like if you compete on the road against a top 10 team, half empty stadium or not, like that's a hell of an accomplishment in year 1 under a new coach.
And I think that would solidify in my mind halfway through the season, and I know it took halfway through the season, but I think that would solidify in my mind that this is indeed a team that can compete with basically anybody on the schedule. That it doesn't matter, aside from probably the top 5 teams in all of college football, they could compete with them, and that's really what I'm waiting for. Because like I said, I don't like to be the guy that's like, hang on, let's just throw up the caution flags here for just a second, because what Arkansas has done so far this season is success to be celebrated. What Sam Pittman, Barry Odom, Kendall Browse, the entire Arkansas football staff has done is reason to celebrate. If Arkansas didn't win another game this year, there would still be reason to celebrate.
But people would be disappointed.
But yes, people would be disappointed because you've raised the expectations now. And that's not a bad thing. You don't want cellar dweller expectations, or else you'll remain a cellar dweller for the rest of the time in the SEC. That's not what you want. You want your expectations to rise, but you also have to remember where this team came from and if they can be at A&M. So if they come out and they lose by 21 points, 17-14 to A&M, that doesn't mean that they can't go out and compete against the Tennessee and LSU and Missouri still left on their schedule. But it is kind of tempering expectations of, okay, maybe the Floridas and A&Ms and Alabamas really are just that far ahead of us.
Yeah, you don't want to go into this game and get knocked out early. But I don't think nothing that we've seen from Arkansas this season indicates that that's going to happen. Right. I think if Arkansas can work out some kinks on offense, namely get the running game going a little bit where it's a lot bit more efficient, and get some guys healthy back on defense, this team is going to be scary down the stretch.
All right, bold prediction time. I promised you before. My bold prediction is that Rakeem Boyd will run for over 100 yards against A&M.
Okay. I like it. I think I'm going to go with Arkansas forces 2 or 3 turnovers, and Hudson Clark picks off another pass.
Oh, my goodness. Clark Island coming out, or Hud Island.
Yep.
Coming out again. And if you didn't know, or if you didn't listen to podcasts or the radio or anything else for this entire off week, that is a name that came from his high school and called Hud Island. I think I heard a guy in Dallas for the Dallas Morning News wrote a story about it, and I think I heard him in 3 different places this week across Arkansas radio.
Yeah, and I wrote one on Friday and didn't go on anybody's show, but it's fine. His parents told me that they thought he was going to be like a really good soccer player first.
Oh.
Like he played on a 6-year-old soccer team when he was 3.5 or 4 years old.
Oh.
And then he had an offer to play in he had an offer to go to the youth soccer school in Holland.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of insight on Hudson Clark.
Can't get that anywhere else. That's right. All right. Well, big thanks to all our guests here on the WholeHog Podcast, for Scotty and for Matt and our entire WholeHogSports.com crew. I am Seth Campbell saying thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to this. There's a bunch of podcasts out there that you could listen to, so we really appreciate you listening to the WholeHog Podcast. If you like the podcast, rate us, subscribe to us, share us with your friends. It's a great way for us to grow and a great way for more Razorback fans to be informed about the Razorbacks. Well, as I said, for those guys, I am Seth Campbell saying so long, and we will see you back here next week.